What up, nerds? So we are doing another circuit deep dive on another legendary pedal, one that is loved by pretty much everyone on Earth besides me, it seems like, but I have to cover it nonetheless because it was very inventive for its time, and one of the most, if not the most widely used pedal in history. If you guys haven't been following, we did a couple of these on we did the Range Master, we did the Germanium Fuzz Face, we did the Proco Rat, the greatest distortion of all time, and today we are going to be doing the Tube Screamer. This is going to be the original TS-808 Tube Screamer. That was, I believe, the first pedal to ever do soft clipping. Someone in the comments tell me if I'm not right about that. I am pretty sure that is correct. I'm like 99% positive that is correct. But what I like to do with these is I try to draw them from memory. And which I'm not very good at, by the way, drawing things from memory, but I know these circuits, so I can kind of usually get a pretty good idea of at least what they're supposed to look like. Then I go back and I check to make sure I'm not feeding you guys any misinformation, and then I bring it back here and I try to tell you guys what each component does piece by piece, as far as my knowledge will extend, which for these circuits is actually pretty far because I've been looking at them for years. So let's jump into this. So I actually made a mistake with the first component on this one, which was pretty embarrassing. So this is our input. This is where our guitar or our, last pedal in the chain, whatever it was that goes into this, starts, and then it hits this capacitor. Now, if you watched any of the other videos, you know what this does. This kind of just cleans up DC at the input. Sometimes it can be a little part of a filter also, but I had it as 22 NF. Apparently the original was 20 NF. I don't know who has that value lying around. That's a weird value for a capacitor. Maybe it's not in Japan. I don't know, but that was the first mistake I made on this. After that, it hits R1, which is just, that's going to protect from overcurrent, so we don't slam too much into this first gain stage in terms of current. Next, we have something pretty similar to what we saw in the Proco Rat. Okay, it's a little bit smaller of a value, but we have 510K, so it's 510,000 hertz resistance between the signal and our voltage reference point. This is going to kind of establish our impedance going into the circuit. Impedance is a very hard thing to explain, probably the most difficult thing to explain in electronics. You will never find a definition that is palatable. At least I couldn't for my first couple of years of doing this, but I've always thought about it as signal strength in relationship to your supply voltage and ground. Now that probably means like nothing to you guys, so you can pretty much just think about it like as, I don't know. I try to relate these things to water in a lot of my videos, like a capacitor is like a water tower in the way it stores energy, and a resistor is like a chokehold in a pipeline, and makes it harder for water to pass through. I guess impedance would be like water pressure. That's not a good analogy. That's a really bad analogy. Don't use that. Just go Google impedance, and if you have questions, ask me. But we're getting the impedance against this value right here, VREF, which is our voltage reference point, that we actually established down here in the power section. Now, we did the same thing, the Proco Rat, right? So starting with this power section, it's a little less complicated actually than the Rat was, a little less going on, but we have this reverse polarity protection diode, which means if you plug something that's center negative into something that's positive, or center positive, or vice versa, you won't hurt the circuit. So you're not going to hurt it with the wrong power supply, right? It'll just blow the diode before it hurts the circuit, and the diode is about a penny, and the circuit could be God knows how much money. Next, we don't have the big honkin' 1 UF capacitor we had on the Rat, but we do have the smaller 100 NF one, and that's just kind of made to roll out some low frequency oscillation hum and stuff in the power section, just trying to get rid of some noise, right? And that's all part of our VCC. This right here is our voltage supply, which in this case is 9 volts. There are some Tube Screamers you can power with 18, but don't do it unless it says so on the box. So in this, for all intents and purposes, this is 9 volts. This is like we were powering it with a 9-volt battery, right? So this would be 9 volts and ground would be 0 volts. Then we have a perfect voltage divider, which we've talked about some of the other videos also. So if you have your voltage supply and you have ground, you have 9 volts, you have 0 volts, you take the same value of resistors, so it could be 10K, 10K, or it could be 1K, 1K, 100K, 100K, whatever, and you connect one to the voltage reference point, one to ground, and then you connect those two to each other you will get the difference of those two values in between them. So if you have 9 volts and 0, what's the difference between those two? You will get 4.5 volts. Okay, so that's half our supply voltage. That's what VREF represents. When you see that net port on these things, that's what VREF means. It means 4.5 volts. Okay. Then we do actually have a pretty big capacitor here to eliminate some hum around there, some of the low frequency noise. I don't know why they didn't put it over here for the Tube Screamer. Everything I read said they didn't put it over there. Whatever. So, anywho, the next thing we hit is our first gain stage. And I use that term very loosely because you're not actually creating that much gain here. This is a little bit more like a buffer. I'm trying to just get like a nice clean signal out, biased with the 10K resistor, just like it was in the RAT with supply voltage directly to the pin 3. And it was a 2SC1815, some weird Japanese transistor. You could use 2N5088 or some other really commonly known NPN transistor would be fine there. It doesn't need to be that one. It's pretty inconsequential to the tone, honestly. At least I think so. But next, 100 UF at C2, okay? Removing some DC at the input coming from that buffer. And then we are gonna, again, kind of fix our signal strength here with another 10K resistor at R5, connecting to that 4.5 volts again before we hit the non-inverting input of our op amp. Okay, so we talked about op amps before. They have a non-inverting and inverting side and an output, right? I mean, they also have where you connect your voltage supply, your ground, and this is actually a dual op amp. So there's actually 2 of them. You see the other one over here. Okay, one chip, 8 pins, 2 op amps. Okay, it's actually how most of the ones you deal with in the pedal world are, because you almost always need some makeup gain at the end, right? So what do we have? Well, we have another feedback network that was pretty similar to what we saw in the Proco RAT. We connect the inverting side and the output kind of together in this loop, but with some stuff in between it. So we've got this 51 PF at C4. That's just kind of roll off some high frequencies, a little low pass filters, roll off like the really high pitch frequencies that only dogs can hear, right? Because we don't want to amplify those. So next we have the same thing we saw in the RAT, where we have a potentiometer. This is a knob or a pedal controller, whatever you want to call it, set up as a variable resistor. Now, what does that mean? If you connect 2 of the pins, a middle one and one of the outside ones, in this case, pin 2 and pin 3, you can essentially make this a resistor that you can control the value of. Okay. So in this case, with a 500K, 500,000 ohm resistor, it can go anywhere between 0 and 500,000 ohms, depending on which way you were turning it, right? So all the way down would be 0, all the way up 500,000. However, in series at R6, we have a 51K resistor. Now, why do we have that? We make it so the resistance here can actually only be 51K, or it can be 551K. And we do that so that you can't ever go all the way down to 0. And this always has like a little bit of gain coming out of it all the time. So like if you turned the gain all the way down on a Tube Screamer and then push the volume, you would actually still get a volume boost. That's actually how most people push their amps with it, right? That's the Stevie Ray Vaughan thing. Keep it clean and just slam the front of the amp, which sounds better than the drive in it personally to me, but I digress. But the real interesting part of this circuit, if I'm correct that it is the first soft clipper, is these diodes have never really been used in this configuration before. So what they did is they took the clippers that normally in a hard clipping configuration are after this stage, and then you need a makeup gain stage after. They're actually happening in this feedback loop. And what that does is the same thing where you have that kind of sine wave, right? Like you draw it like this and you're cutting the top and the bottom off the wave so that they're square, right? Now, why do we do it in here instead? Well, it actually turns out it has a less dramatic effect on clipping the signal here. It doesn't, one, you get less of the actual op amp fizziness itself. Like some people, apparently the op amp clipping in itself, when you just push an op amp too hard, some people think it's fizzy or brittle or whatever you want to call it, whatever one of those words is. And this kind of keeps it from ever hitting that stage. It's a little more natural, for lack of a better word. It doesn't get too dirty too quick and still kind of maintains a little bit of your original sound a little bit better, apparently. To each their own. Some people think this is the difference between an overdrive and a distortion. I believe there's way more to it than that, but this would be the overdrive, hard clipping being more of a distortion. I generally don't like soft clippers. What does that say about me? But I got a lot of overdrives I like. And then next, we actually have the same thing we had in the Proco RAT, where we have like a little bit of a filter right here, right? So this creates a low pass at like 700 hertz. Everyone thinks this number is different, where like the Tube Screamer like mid hump is. If you do the math, I think it's somewhere around like 700 hertz, which means that all high frequencies above that are not being amplified, right? We are slamming the lows and the mids, is pretty much what we're doing. Next, coming out here, this is the output, right? So all that just happened. Pushing through, we got another 1K here, just like we did on this one. This is just like preventing overcurrent, right? And then right here, we kind of have another low pass. Now, this one's biasing the input going into this one again, but this right here is another 700 hertz low pass. Like that frequency is very important to this pedal in particular. However, this next part is what we call an active EQ. Okay, this means it's not just attenuating frequencies, we can boost them also, and that's what we use the other side of this dual op amp for, is this section right here. Now, first off, the tone pot for a Tube Screamer is a W20K. It's a really weird taper that you pretty much don't find anywhere else, but it does work for this pedal, and it sounds weird without it, feels weird without it. So it is definitely part of the the magic that is the Tube Screamer. The magic that is the Tube Screamer. It certainly isn't these diodes, these MA150s. You can replace those with 1N4148s or 1N914s, like any of the generic diodes you find in everything. But you can put other diodes in if you want. They're not going to sound like a Tube Screamer. But yeah, okay. So the way this works is that as you turn this to the left, you are essentially feeding this 220 NF and 220 ohm little network right here into the positive side, okay, of this op amp. So the non-inverting side of this op amp, okay? And you get kind of a low pass out of that, right? So if you turn the knob to the left, it's cutting off high frequencies. This is the way that's working. But if you turn it to the right, it's actually cutting out the low frequencies. Now it creates a high pass around like 3K, 3.2K. See, I don't know this one as well because I don't love this circuit. I'm not as into it. But that's the way this works. You're cutting one while you're boosting the other. It's an interesting design. Don't get me wrong. I never like the sound of this EQ. I'm going to stop talking garbage about the Tube Screamer. It's a more important pedal than anything I've ever made, I suppose. But moving on, C7 is 1 UF for cleaning up some DC. It's a big enough value where we're not really attenuating any frequencies or anything like going through. And another 1K for some, preventing overcurrent. Then we hit our volume stage. Now this is pretty interesting. We hit our volume stage where we actually, instead of running to ground like a traditional volume, we actually run to that voltage reference point. Okay, so we're, for all, aside from a couple of places in this circuit, most of the time we're actually substituting zero volts for 4.5. Anywhere you see VREF, like we talked about before. And you can even do that at the output volume. That's totally okay. That will work in this particular configuration. But then next we hit 100 NF, right? Preventing DC from running back. And then we have that same value to adjust the impedance that we had before the last stage. And if you look at it, it's just another buffer. So we go buffer, we go clipping stage, we get some makeup gain and some EQ from here, and then we get the rest of the makeup gain from here again. And then it's a big value cap, so we're really not losing anything at the end. 10 UF, adjusting for the impedance again with this 10K. And yeah, that's the Tube Screamer. It's pretty great for what it is. It's a good design. There was a lot of new and interesting things that came out with this pedal when it came out. People probably hadn't played much like it, but it does what its name implies, right? You can slam an amp really hard with it. There's a lot of volume on tap, a lot of gain on tap, but not the gain, not like in the crunchy way you're thinking of. I mean, it gets dirty, but not in the way I like, I guess. What would I do to change this, right? There's a lot of things you can do to mod a Tube Screamer. You can make this cap bigger. That'll allow for more low end to come in. I've gone as far as changing both of these buffers to be op amp buffers, and it actually added a little more clarity, like more than I thought it would, because that just sounds like some peach posh mojo BS, I also find this volume pot works better if it's a 100K, a logarithmic taper. I just think it works better. You can change these diodes. Turbo Tube Screamer uses LEDs. Why? Because LEDs are light emitting diodes, just with a really high forward voltage drop. So you get way more headroom. Change those out. You can change this value right here and make it bigger. This is kind of like what the Timmy does. You can you can make this value bigger and it'll add more low end distortion, which is cool. Actually, that kind of makes me like it more. You know what I mean? Just because I don't like the nasal. I hate mids. That's where I'm putting it. I hate mids. I'm going to start a war on mids. This pedal is all mids all the time. But you can make that value bigger to give yourself some more low end and not just push the mids as hard, you know? What else would I do to it? I don't know, man. I'm sure there's a lot more I could do to this, but I'd probably get rid of this whole EQ section, add like a gyrator style EQ with multiple bands. Probably what I would do. Do whatever you want. Tube Screamer has been modified so many times, guys. This output stage is pretty much the only difference between like a TS9 and TS808. Don't let anyone tell you different. But yeah, that is it. That is the Tube Screamer. I hope you guys are digging these. As much as I seem like I might not be enjoying this one, I got a lot of opinions, and opinions are fun for me. So this is also just a test to see how much I know and how much I can teach you guys. And I like doing a lot of these for memory, kind of like a mental exercise. All of that being said, thank you so much for watching these videos. Let me know if you have any circuits you want me to go over that I haven't already in the comments. Like and subscribe. Obviously follow if you want to see more of these. I plan on releasing at least a few more because they're fun for me, regardless of what you guys think. But yeah, again, do all the YouTubey stuff that it says to do right there. And I will see you guys next time.